Recently, a cooperative bank in Maharashtra, it comes under RBI's scanner, and RBI have stopped any kind of the deposit taking activity, and many of the financial transaction of the bank is freezed by RBI. What important thing to focus here is, it is not a private sector bank or public sector bank. It is a cooperative bank. And it is not first time that cooperative bank come under the scanner. If you'll see in last 2 years, somewhere around 8 to 9, I said 8 cooperative bank in last 3 years. In last 3 years, 8 cooperative banks are in news because of different scams or problems they have faced. And if you'll see the frequency, cooperative bank, private sector banks and public sector banks, cooperative banks are more vulnerable to face such kind of crisis. Now question is why cooperative banks are more vulnerable for such kind of the scams and such kind of the problems. Okay, so let's understand the cooperative banking structure in India. It will help you to understand why cooperative banking in India is more vulnerable than public sector and private sector banks in India. Okay, so in this context, the cooperative banking in India is basically divided into 2 categories, that is urban cooperative and other is rural cooperative. Urban cooperative banks and rural cooperative banks. Urban cooperative banks are further of 2 types. Single state means those banks, cooperative banks, which are focused in the urban area and they are working only in one state. For example, suppose that ABC Bank and this ABC Cooperative Bank functioned only in the state of Telangana. Fine. Whereas XYZ Bank is not only functional in Telangana, but nearby states like Maharashtra, AP, Tamil Nadu, then it will come under what? That it will come under multi-state cooperative bank. Fine. So in this way, this is the structure of what? This is the structure of urban cooperative. Whereas in the context of rural cooperative, here the banking is divided in 2 ways. One is long-term need, long-term, and other is short-term. So this short-term have a pyramidal structure. Fine. First is state level, then district level, then primary level. Means at very village level. Fine. Whereas long term is divided at primary level and state level. For more clarity, I will draw this structure on the next page. That is, first is short term. So for short term at very village level, that is primary agriculture cooperative societies. Then district central cooperative banks. Sometimes it is mentioned central cooperative bank, but it is district central cooperative bank. Then there is a state cooperative bank, SCBs. State cooperative banks, they are in the top of the hierarchy, and then it is a district cooperative central bank, and then it is what? Then it is primary agriculture cooperative society. Whereas for the long term, they are also known as land development bank. So here primary cooperative agricultural and rural development bank. Fine. Then this is the basic unit, works at what? Village and district level, and then state, cooperative, agricultural and rural development bank. So they work at what? State level, and their main area is to provide long-term financial assistance to rural people, especially whom? Farmers. Whereas their focus is on what? Their focus is on immediate need and requirement. For example, if farmer want to purchase fertilizers, fine, he want to make payment for the seeds. So for these requirement, they can reach to what? Short-term structure. So this is a structure of what? This is a structure of rural cooperative. Rural cooperative in India. I will attach the detailed notes of cooperative banking in India in the PDF in the description, so that you can download it from there. It will help you to understand the things in the detail. I am mentioning this thing here, but in the PDF, I will mention all the nitty-gritties of these things, which will be helpful for you to write in the exam, in the prelims as well as mains. Fine. But now, as I mentioned, कि cooperative banking is of what? Urban cooperative and rural cooperative. Fine. Now, just briefly understand the cooperative movement in India. So, till then, 1910, cooperatives was not recognized as a legal entity in India. Then many of the cooperatives in India, they have run a movement by 1913. By 1913, British government have recognized cooperative as a legal entity. Okay. And post-independence, government also accepted the position, and government have mentioned that cooperatives in India, that will be governed by the law made by the state legislature. So cooperative become state subject. Fine. Cooperative become what? State subject. So any cooperative, they are managed by what? They are managed by State Cooperative Act. Okay. Now, if any cooperative want to run a bank, then they need a license from whom? RBI. Fine. Means what? A cooperative bank. A cooperative bank which is run by a cooperative society need a license from whom? RBI. So with the license given by the RBI, they can run their banking. But the administrative structure, of cooperative bank is controlled by state government law, state government's law, that is controlling the administrative structure. Whereas banking function is controlled by RBI under Banking Regulation Act. Banking Regulation Act 1949. So recruitment of the cooperative bank is not being done as per the RBI structure. It is not being done by the RBI structure. It is run by what? It is run by state government's law. And that is why there is much more political interference in the administrative functioning of what? Cooperative banks, higher management. And because of the political interference and weak structure. Why? Because the supervision of the administrative structure is not in the hand of whom? RBI. Whereas in the case of public sector banks, public sector bank, example, SBI. Fine. Private sector bank like HDFC Bank. So these banks, their administrative structure and their banking function, both are supervised by whom? RBI, and stringent terms and conditions and regular scrutiny and audit. regular scrutiny and audit. So that is why these banks are less vulnerable for any kind of fraud. I'm not saying that they are not vulnerable, but they are less vulnerable because regular auditing and supervision by whom? Regular auditing and supervision by whom? RBI. Whereas in the context of what? Cooperative banking, though the banking function is under RBI, and even RBI have designated NABARD, National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, to provide help and assistance, especially in the credit providing, other things for agriculture and rural development. Fine. So in the case of these cooperative banks, the power of RBI is limited and less supervision, less scrutiny is there. And that is why state cooperative banks, state-based, single state-based cooperative bank or multi-state-based cooperative bank, they are more vulnerable. They are more vulnerable from such kind of scams. Fine. So the question is being asked, is it safe to invest in the cooperative bank? This is the question is in debate right now. Many of the bankers, financial analysts, they said that there is more vulnerability. So if you are investing a much bigger amount in the cooperative bank, then your money may be under what? Problem. But if this narrative is going to deeper, then cooperative bank which are already struggling for such kind of the issues, they are having less liquidity, their functioning is going to be what? Functioning is going to be more problematic. So it is a high time for the state government and government of India sit together and decide a uniformity of law in what? Cooperative banking, and to create a more stringent and more strict law in order to make sure that the scrutiny and regular audits being conducted so that the investors' money or depositors' money cannot be in the problem. Okay? Thank you.
కాంపిటేటివ్ ఎగ్జామ్ సంబంధించి ప్రత్యేకంగా సివిల్ సర్వీసెస్ ఎగ్జామ్ సంబంధించి ఏ ఆప్షన్ చూస్ చేసుకోవాలి, ప్రిపరేషన్ ఎప్పుడు స్టార్ట్ చేయాలి, ఏ బుక్స్ రిఫర్ చేయాలి, ఇలాంటి డౌట్స్ ఉంటే CSBIS అకాడమీని కాంటాక్ట్ అవ్వచ్చు. దీనికి సంబంధించి నా పర్సనల్ అపాయింట్మెంట్ ఈ వీడియో పైన డిస్ప్లే అవుతున్న కాంటాక్ట్ నెంబర్కి ఫోన్ చేసి తీసుకోవచ్చు.